New York Stock Exchange. And then she suddenly turned into this old Mexican practices of balancing rocks. And now she's doing this meditative performances, balancing unbalanced things. So the idea was she would come for 5 months. Now it will be just 3 weeks to Riga, and she will balance this different constructions. And it's a very meditative practice she's doing. Another one is a project by Italian based in Berlin artist Tommaso Rassena, who is doing the project Irisin, trying to seek how to devise new modes of sensitivity and achieve an ethical collaboration with the atmosphere and the environment, free-form borders. So he's using the solar energy and wind in order to travel with the balloon. And as one of the idea was to launch this flying balloon from Berlin to Riga with the natural wind corridors and sun. There are some images of this project. Another one is a Latvian wonderful woman, Via Eniņa. She's a professor of the Latvian University on herbs. And she's supposed to develop a garden of healing herbs. And as the main area of the Biennial is the industrial former port of Riga, is a huge area of 200,000 square meters. We were planting the healing herbs around, and now they are growing up. This is the images of the area where the Biennial will happen. It's quite Tarkovskian style environment, and the area in transition, because also transformation is the main topic of the exhibition. And here is another nice quote about that. Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depends on the ideas that align around. And here is a very nice article about coronavirus capitalism and how to beat it by Naomi Klein. As we spoke with Anna, my idea was to represent some overview of how arts institutions and art world transformed due to coronavirus situation and which forms appeared. And here is the map of institutions and the actors of these institutions who turned mostly into online. And we're all, I think, familiar that even those who use, I think, predicate Mac might be aware of all the contemporary software. The social media, which is Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and of course Zoom became very popular. And tailor-made platforms appeared, like specially designed new websites, VR, AR experience, viewing rooms, online magazine, digital archives, and I think more and more are in the process. And here are my favorite examples of, for example, Caroline Christoph Bakarjev, one of the outstanding female curators of nowadays. She was a curator of Documenta, and that was one of the best exhibitions considered of nowadays, especially curated by female artists. So she worked into transforming the collection of Italian art of Castello di Rivoli. I highly recommend you to watch how it is organized. Is one of the very good examples how they turned the collection into the digital format. And now you can see a lot of good contemporary artists represented. There is another platform, International Online, is a common platform for research and communication, which gather the institutions from European countries. And initially it was formed as the outset of the 2007 financial crisis. And that's a very good working platform for European art museums and art institutions for support. Another interesting initiative is the Quarantine Arts, initiated by London-based curator Sasha Galitsina. It's a very inspiring platform where, for example, a belly dancer is teaching for drawing and for exchange and open-hearted, open-ended conversation about life while staying in. And another platform is a Not Cancelled. This is a digital platform for galleries. Maybe Natalya, this is familiar for you. Because due to the COVID changes, many art initiatives has been cancelled, and then there was a flash mob saying not cancelled, postponed. However, there is a very nice platform which united all the acting institutions and galleries in order to not cancel art. Another my favorite experience is the live streams with Johann König. His galleries from Berlin. He started to visit studios online with Instagram, asking questions, and it was a very good educational platform, both for galleries and for the artists, how to behave, what to ask, what to do, and how actually to visit the studios. And it was a very nice new experimental form of interview. Another my favorite feed is organized by curators and for curators. Chuz Martinez, she's the head of Art Basel Institute. She started to write the Corona tales on very interesting topics of nowadays. So you can find it also on Instagram. And to read is about education, gender, art, or some everyday problems. Another new format which appeared is the live streams between artists. So coronavirus created the new format of communication, which is between artists, also in online, and visiting studios online and exchange of the artists. Before it was quite invisible part of artistic communication. This is a very good Berlin Art Link, which gathers what to see online as a weekly selection. The last part of my presentation would be dedicated to women in art. And I would like to start with this slide from the Riboka 1 exhibition. As I said, one of the topics of the topic of the first biennial was everything was forever until it was no more, saying that nothing is eternal. And of course, feminism movements is something what was in transition, especially during the 20th century. And we had a project represented by the Swedish artist Petra Bauer, together with Rebecca Katzor, the grammar of feminist organizing. And here you can see the archival wallpapers of the first female gatherings in Sweden in the early 20th century. As all of you know, it was not allowed for women to gather officially, and the only reason was to gather for the tea or for knitting or for sewing. And they organized these clubs, but in the meanwhile, while they were reading or drinking tea, they were able to discuss all the political questions and shaping these communities. And as a part of the project was organizing the Assembly of Feminists in Riga. And we had the 40 participants of the European, Nordic, Scandinavian region who came, and they had 3 days sessions, tea drinking and discussing the questions. And that was a part of art project of the first biennial as well. Here are some resources which I wanted to share as supportive platforms for artists and for women artists. Is women's art, quite inspiring, contains a lot of information about how build the community, resources, some grants. This one, organization that advance the status of a woman, also contains a lot of nice links and grants. and this one is the National Endowment for the Arts, very much oriented on the United States. However, the models can be very much relevant for everyone, especially who is acting in this area. And this is Coronavirus Resources, Arts, Culture, and the Cultural Mobility. Also contains all the relevant things dedicated to how to act during the coronavirus, and which grants new initiatives and platforms appeared. So, and in the end of my conversation, I wanted to show a few art projects in the media platform. For example, Chinese artist Chao Fei suggested count how many eyes are at your home. They watch compassionately. So everyone is invited to act. For example, Alexandra Perici is a very famous performative artist. She developed a manual called Social Media for Kitchen or the Bathroom. As a part of the Riga Biennial, we also were trying to interact with the people, and together with our artists, being on a distance, we launched the program with windows. So every artist took a picture of their window where they were sitting and watching the environment around, and created an artworks. So we publish it also in our social media. So thank you for your attention. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Olga. It was very interesting and new experience for, I believe, for everybody. Thank you for a lot of resources. And I have a question. Is there any new ideas for the future of Biennale now in our situation? And everything will come back normal, I believe, but do you see some changes that might happen in the future?
We all
Biennale?
well, yeah. Thank you for your question. First of all, now we all experiment with the format of art, which shape it can take. We chose this movie shape, and it will be again experiment between the contemporary art exhibition and visiting of an exhibition and watching a movie, and having this experience of visiting the show which was quite engaging in watching videos, watching performances, listening, making a meditation, being in a site-specific area. So our challenge is to make a movie such as engaging as this experience of visiting the exhibition. However, to my opinion, nothing would substitute visiting or meeting people in real life, and this what should remain. What now we reduced all.
Hello. Olga, we can't hear you.
Amount.
It was some.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
So we'll see how everything would influence. It's really interesting times we live in, and every institution is transforming and reducing costs. And as a budget and money is a big part of existing of arts, and that would influence. Maybe somewhere we can save money, and we won't waste it in the way we did before, because we had to be resilient in a many ways now. And the biennial, so speaking of the biennial, we plan to do the sword edition. So we'll see how this second happen in 3 weeks. And but still we have a big plan to do the sword biennial in 2022. Hopefully the world will not collapse and we'll be able to meet each other, at least digitally.
Okay, thank you for thank you for your answer. Is anybody have question?
Also, I actually wanted to say about the female presence in art life. We have a team of 15 members, and 12 of them are female. And the first biennial, we were like, the big team was 35 members, and we had 31 women in charge of the biennial, and we even were called misandric biennial by one of the art critics. But there was no intention of it, because I don't know whether you know or not, Latvia is a very female country. The proportion of gender is 16 women to 1 man in the country, and in charge of all art institution you can find only women mostly. So, and there is a female competition between all of them.
Well, lucky man in Riga. Natalya, did you want to ask?
I have a question. Like talking about the financial part, the Riga Biennale is supported by government, or it's like fundraising, or how does it work? Because it's really, I think, crucial nowadays how to survive for the this type of the massive exhibition, I can say.
Yes, indeed. Luckily we have a private foundation. As I said, Agnia Mirgorodska, also a very generous woman who organized it. This is her family foundation, and she's half Lithuanian, half Russian, and she had a dream to organize something with the Baltics, promoting the Baltics, and she is investing much her private money. However, as an institution, with the second edition, we started to work with the fundraising, and located in Europe, and working with international artists. We apply for international grants in all countries from where we have an artist, having support from embassies. So we have few colleagues who worked specifically on grants, making these applications, and so we have a quite nice support this year. The first year was fully the private money. Even the government didn't support us, and because we were just a new institution, no one knew anything, and now we have something what we can prove and show as an example, and the positive changes of the city, of the social engagement, and so on.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the Biennale is very, very important in city life, and you're doing a great job. Thank you.
So I very much invite everyone if you would have a chance to come.
Yeah, as soon as it will be allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, Olga. And I'd like to move to Tanya. Tanya, your turn, please.
Mute. Let me see if I share screen. I may need to unplug my mic in order for you to hear video. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to test this, but let's just see how this goes. Okay. There we go. Okay, and then I need to get here. Of course, the present button is hidden underneath all of you. There we go. All right, so I'm going to be talking about the sort of coping that the musicians and dancers that I work with have engaged in during the COVID-19 era. My main research areas are Uzbek traditional music, and I'm currently working on a book project on US contradance, which is a music and dance practice that came over to the US with British colonization, and in parts of the region of New England, the northeast part of the country. It's been a continuous participatory music and dance practice for about 300 years. And so let's go. So I want to set the stage first in terms of what musicians and dancers, both professionals and non-professionals, are confronting. And I'm sorry that my little arrow is hidden by people, perhaps, but if you can look at, this is my favorite of the images of the phases of reopening, because if you look phase 2, they're like, we don't even know what phase 2 is, but we know that concerts and sporting events are in phase 3, right? So concerts are always the last on the list of things that can reopen. This is from the city of Sandy, Oregon. This is Washington State's reopening with 4 phases, and you'll notice that concert venues are phase 4 once we have either reliable treatment or vaccines, when high-risk populations are allowed out. Concerts are last, right? We're not having a concert again, for a live concert again for a very, very long time. We also have dire forecasts for these large ensembles, especially symphonic works, opera, choirs. I have a couple of links here for you. UK orchestras, even the UK, which comparative to the US is incredibly well funded and well supported by audiences. Conductors are warning that orchestras may not survive in the country. And we have this particular sort of blog or feed, middleclassartist.com, is very useful. It's founded by a tenor, and a lot of musicians participate in there. And he's talking about the fact that audience attendance is actually the least concern when we come back. The real question is, can we structure the orchestra and can we structure audience spaces in ways to keep them safe? The other issue is that group singing is a super spreader event, right? There was a very famous choir practice in Skagit County, Washington, where I believe 90% of the people who participated became infected. And there's also now the National Association of Teachers for Singing and other choral sort of organizations in the US are essentially saying that there cannot be group singing safely until there is a vaccine. So this is pretty dire if you look at what's going on in terms of what musicians, especially professional musicians who are used to playing European classical music in large groups, that profession is in crisis. I want to add to that the piece that is women sort of historically across cultures are associated with care duties, right? And so we're talking about childcare, we're talking about elder care, we're talking about the keeping of the hearth. And there's now some data about what COVID-19 did to women's professional productivity, at least in the academy. These 2 articles cite studies that looked at journal submission by professors and other academics in the era of COVID-19. And the terrifying thing is across disciplines, right? So not just ethnomusicologists, but sociologists and biologists, whoever you are, if you're a woman, odds are you haven't submitted that publication that will get you promotion. So women's, at least en masse, female academics are not able to produce. And we have other stories about this, right? About how, you know, women have decided to become stay-at-home moms because what else are you going to do, right? And so it's all about the increase in care, because if you think about the second wave of feminism, which I'm talking about the women's liberation movement in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the gains of the women's liberation movement, of course, were primarily not sharing care responsibilities with the men in our lives, but shunting them off to professional caregivers and service workers that are now not able to care for our children or care for our elders, right? We have lots of families bringing their elders in from nursing homes and whatnot and other institutions. So this is arguably a doubly dire forecast for women musicians and dancers. So what are we doing about it is the question. And at least in my circles, in contradance, in Uzbek traditional music, and in the academy, I'm looking at what existed beforehand. So one-on-one lessons in the sort of master apprentice, right? The Ustad Shogird in Uzbek, the master apprentice model that functions in European classical music and in Uzbek classical music, Central Asian classical music, that still works online. You can get on WhatsApp or FaceTime or any of these things and have one-on-one lessons. I'm currently studying an instrument called the komuz that is a Kyrgyz traditional music, and my teacher happens to be in Santa Clara. When I'm in Santa Cruz. She's 45 minutes from my house, but under shelter in place, I can't go have a lesson with her. So we got on FaceTime. I was able to use WhatsApp to talk to one of my teachers in Tashkent at this time. So this one-on-one lesson over video model, this is something that has been effective pre-COVID. Live stream performances of groups that were all in one place also existed in the pre-COVID era. Live group activity, live group music making especially, is a much larger challenge, and that has everything to do with the laws of physics, right? Sound and visual travel at different speeds. Everyone's up with that, right? So this is why sometimes, even when we're doing Zoom, my words will come before or sometimes after, depending on how the internet connection is working. They won't sync with the visual won't sync. But when people are speaking, we don't mind so much. When people are trying to make music together, we expect a much higher level of synchronization, and that is not possible, at least with the technology as we have. People are hypothesizing that we might be able to get some kind of delay sync going on, but that's a really complex level of technical engagement, especially now expect platforms to be largely free. That arose for this particular challenge, because how do we still engage as groups that want to get together and participate in music making, not just with the members of our household? And so one popular approach is workshops. So you have multiple students, like master classes, where the students are on mute and the master teacher is playing an audible and everyone at home is playing along, and the sync doesn't work, but people are still getting their information. Another popular solution is the creation of performances individually. So everyone records their part and then they mix it using a cappella or BandLab or one of the other applications that allows you to sync the multiple parts together. And then another popular strategy is creating live performances where all but one of the members, well, basically all the members of their group record their tracks and then they're mixed together. And each person, they sort of take turns through the ensemble of playing their part with the other people recorded, and then they switch to another band member and they're playing their part with the rest recorded. So people have gotten very creative about how to simulate, at least, the phenomenon of making music together, which demands a high level of synchronization. The reality is that there's nothing quite like live music in that respect, and as you can see, probably not until there's a vaccine are we going to be able to truly get back to that. So I wanted to play a couple of videos for you. Let me know if you can hear these. If not, I'll need to unplug my mic. This is Feruza Mahmudova, the daughter of one of my teachers, playing dutar. Mohichehra Shakhmuradova, who is a vocalist, and Farhod Yarmatov, who is a Kashgar Rabab player or a tarist, I can't remember, and I can't see it in the video. Anyway, what's interesting is Feruza and Mohichehra are both in Uzbekistan, they're both in Tashkent, and Farhod is in Tajikistan. And this practice that they play is a cultural shared musical practice. Settled Central Asian classical music is a bilingual experience. People do it in both Tajik and Uzbek. Often the same songs have both Tajik and Uzbek versions of them. And it is very common in live music to see people from both countries playing together in ensembles. A lot of Tajik students studied at the Tashkent Conservatory and now are back in Tajikistan. So this has been a nationally traversing practice before these nations existed, of course. And now what is interesting is you're seeing people use, in this case it's KinaMaster, but they're using these syncing apps to make these things across national lines. Let's see, can we hear it? Oh, that didn't work. Come on now. Let's see. Here we go. Can you hear it? Where is it going? Come on. Can you hear it? No. All right, I'm going to do this.
Yes.
Why isn't it? Okay, sorry. Let's see, can we keep that going now? One more time. I'll stop that there for now. Let's go back to the slide. So this is a Tanavar. It's from the Fergana Valley region, which is shared between, which is a valley region shared between the nations right now of Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. This is a Sufi ghazal text by Sher Mohammad Munis, and it has a variety of melodies that have been given to it in this song and dance format that is the Tanavar, that is very famous. And I think it's really kind of wonderful that you see the multi-ethnic, multinational, multilinguist, multi-religious, because it's shared by both Jewish and Muslim practitioners. You see that nature actually becoming more visible in the creation of these collaborations across national lines. So this is one thing that's going on. Talking about online pedagogy, how do you teach musical ensembles? This is my friend and colleague Ruth Miller. She teaches an Asian drumming ensemble at Green River College in Washington, and it was put online at an emergency basis. And how do you get students to play Korean drumming, samulnori, which is a farmer's drumming tradition out of Korea? How do you get them to do this from their homes with no Korean instruments? Well, as you can see from the little screenshot, she asked them to do a found object drum ensemble. And so you can see some people are playing on boxes, some people are playing on mason jars. People have come up with whatever they can do to create the 4 different instruments of the samulnori ensemble. Would you like to hear some of this? Yes, can we hear some of this? And then what happened is, again, they can't, when she does this live, she's playing and everyone's on mute and everyone is playing along with their boxes and you can't hear one another, you can only hear Ruth. In the performance, she had them submit a recording and then she synced them all. And as you know, again, with this law of physics, you will hear that the audio is synced, not the visual, if that makes sense. So let's give this a listen, if it will play along with us. That off. Okay, so that was the piece Utari. Another aspect of online pedagogy that I think is incredibly exciting is the Pomegranate Garden Dance platform. And this was started in the COVID era. This was started in March by Natalya Nayun, who is a trained, an American woman, I believe, trained in Central Asian dance. She lives in Oakland, California. But what is exciting is that she now has a platform for Persian and Central Asian dance that allows master teachers from Uzbekistan, from Azerbaijan, from all over the world, really, from Iran, of course, to teach students and to profit from teaching students. Because, of course, these dance teachers can't hold dance classes and get their fees from their dance classes either. And she has specifically set up a way to work with the Iranian banking system, which was a special challenge. And so I believe they do 3 classes a day. You can find their Facebook feed, or that's www.pomegranategarden. Dance is their website, and you can get to them through there. But you can study Central Asian and Persian dance 3 or 4 times a day, 7 days a week now, and it's kind of amazing. And this has come up just in the last few months, and I think this is one of those silver lining type things that will be able to continue in the post-COVID era, that all of a sudden we have the ability to learn. And again, choreographic challenges are slightly less than the musical challenges in terms of synchronization. The way that the dancers are teaching their students, I believe they're still putting everyone on mute, but they're able to use recorded backing tracks that they have with them and just demo the choreography and whatnot. So that's that. And finally, I wanted to talk about what I've been doing in this, because I'm currently working on my contra dance book. And so one of the things that I have started is that Audrey Nuth is a famous in the contra dance world traditional fiddler from New England who recently moved to the East Bay in California. And in the COVID era, she lost all her jobs like everyone. I mean, most musicians are just tacking up. There was this cancellation, this cancellation, this cancellation. And if you have a day job, that's one thing. But if you are a musician who lives by your performances, having the rest of the year canceled gradually, painfully, slowly, every day you're counting new cancellations, that's terrifying. And so Audrey Nuth, we got to hear about her project of applying and eventually getting unemployment, but also these workshops, which are donation based. She won't turn people away for lack of funds, but you participate on Monday afternoons, Pacific time, it's from 4 to 6. And if you play a melodic instrument, you can log into Tunes and Stuff, and she will send out a video of herself playing the week's tune. I'm going to play you, the third week was William Blake is Dead, that's a tune by Rodney Miller. And so she'll send this video of herself playing it out first. And let's see if we can hear that. Come on, Audrey. Let's hear ya. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that's what she sends out ahead of time in her Google folder. You can access it, or if you're really busy with your care responsibilities like me, sometimes you just show up to class and figure out what you're learning then. Now, I'm an ethnomusicologist. I am not a fiddle player, never have been. I was a conservatory trained bassoonist, and I freelanced for a while, but I don't really play the bassoon anymore. What I play is the Central Asian dutar, and I lead a dutar ensemble at UCSC. So I found myself in COVID-19 era at home, not allowed access to my office with my dutar. So I started taking her classes to learn these fiddle tunes that accompany contra dances, but I was learning her tunes on my dutar. So in between these 2 videos, what would happen is an online workshop, and it would look a lot like my friend Ruth's workshops, where she would be teaching and everyone would be on mute, and lots of fiddlers, some penny whistle players, a couple accordionists, some mandolin players, and me with my dutar will be sitting there doing her tune along with her. And she's great at this, even though she can't hear anyone. After she stops a little bit, she's like, that sounds wonderful. And it's amazing how much of the sort of masterclass experience you can actually replicate in these strange times. So after that week's tune, it actually laid on the dutar really well. I'll give you a little bit of a sound just to close things out, a little sound of what I was doing on the dutar. There we go. So this is William Blake is Dead on the Uzbek dutar. There you go. So although I normally play canovars and I play makom and I play a lot of other things, the strange situation that I find myself in means that I'm now learning New England fiddle tunes and old time tunes on the dutar. And I did not bring it to New York with me, but I have my komus. So this Monday, I hope to be attending Audrey Newth's tunes and stuff class with my komus. It's going to be strange, but I'm learning a lot and it's keeping my chops up for when I'm able to get to Central Asia again. And I suppose that's where I'll leave things. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That's incredible. Oh my God. Now I know how, like, I never thought about musicians in these situations, and like, it's really damaged the whole institution.
Yeah, no, and I mean, these institutions may not come back. The other thing to remember is that we in the US are already education and the arts are incredibly defunded, not even underfunded, defunded. Olga, you put up the NEA website. The NEA was defunded. All of their grants haven't existed for a few years now. Our resources coming out of the federal government have shrunk incredibly. And so it's a little bit of a scary time, and it's also exciting to see, you can see all these women are doing incredible things, oftentimes on donation basis, and, they're making it happen anyway, even without institutional funding, even without any of these things. I don't know, I'm really impressed with my fellow musicians and musicologists. They are amazing and inspiring, and it's certainly playing fiddle tunes on the dutar has made my life so much better for the last few months, even though it's a really goofy thing to do.
Well, girls, do you have questions maybe? Natalya, Feruza, Olga?
Yes, I do have a question. I was born in Samarkand, in the center of Central Asia, and somehow I just find out about Komus only 2 years ago on Sadat Ismailova exhibition, and she invited a lady from Kyrgyzstan, and it's very simple instrument but sounds very melodic, yeah, and I was very surprised. And talking about dutar, karnai, surnai, it's like it's a very difficult instrument. How you find your way towards the Central Asian instruments? I'm very curious about it.
Sure. Well, this is a long story, but I essentially, you can read the first chapter of my book on women musicians in Uzbekistan if you'd like. I'm sure some library somewhere has it. But essentially, I met an Uzbek musicologist, Dr. Razia Sultanova. We met on a train, actually. We got stuck on a train for 15 hours on our way to a conference on Shostakovich in Glasgow, Scotland. And she was the one who introduced me to the dutar at her New Year's Eve party, as you do. And I fell in love with it. It was fascinating. As you say, it looks deceptively simple, right? The dutar has 2 strings. I was amazed at what she was able to do with those 2 strings. And the komus is a 3-stringed instrument. It's a 3-stringed fretless instrument. I can tell you it is not simple. And that's what I love about it. It looks simple. It is deceptively simple looking. But getting a good sound out of it is really, really challenging. And one of the things that excites me about the dutar, as well as the komus, and I'm also interested in the Kazakh dombra. I think my 3rd book is going to be about female lute players in those 3 countries. I want to do a comparative study of female dutar players, female komus players, and female dombra players in Kazakhstan. And anyway, it's deceptively simple, but Razia Sultanova, who is, she teaches now at Cambridge, she took me into her home, and I was fascinated at this New Year's Eve party. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And she sat me down in the middle of the New Year's Eve party. Everyone else was like drinking and making merry. And she's sitting here going, this is how you play the dutar. And her husband's like, Razia, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, go away. This is just how women do things. And that was 20 years ago now. And I've been playing the dutar ever since, thanks to her. And she connected me with one of my master teachers in Tashkent, Malika Ziyaeva. And so when I started my PhD program at University of California, Los Angeles, I started going to Tashkent as often as I could. I lived there over multiple trips for about a total of 1.5 years. And I studied with Manikopa and also Rosa Hadjaeva, who plays a slightly different style of music. And the rest is history. Now I lead a group of dutar players in Santa Cruz, California, whenever I can. So it's exciting.
It's incredible. Thank you for what you're doing.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Feruza, Olga. Yeah.
Did you have any experimental collaborations with modern musicians?
You know, I don't. The Bang on a Can festival, I have feelings. It's one thing. Every once in a while, some of our composers show an interest in the dutar, and I'm always welcome. I'm always willing to show them the basic techniques so that they can work with it. We haven't had any of our composers do pieces for dutar yet. I think a dutar concerto would be pretty awesome. I think people in Uzbekistan have written dutar concertos, but I think it would be neat to have someone write that in Santa Cruz as well. What I do see in terms of experimental art music, the Bang on a Can collective in New York, I have a little bit of a complex analysis of that, because the Bang on a Can, it's, Evan Ziporin, I believe is his name. There are a few sort of big name experimental music people in New York who created this festival essentially to bring musicians from lots of places and create interesting music and hybrids. But I'm always a little concerned about authorship and representation. A few of my friends in Tashkent have gone to New York and participated in it. And while they're very proud of their time in New York and like they had this awesome time, it always seems the power dynamic makes me a little bit uncomfortable, because it's sort of the New York dude saying, okay, now you do your things and we'll all improvise together. And it becomes a little bit like sort of European and American style experimental music becomes the forming process, and musical techniques and sounds and timbres from outside Western Europe and America become sort of the component parts. It almost, I guess what makes me uncomfortable is the power dynamic that's sort of implied there. And I always want to make sure that we are understanding the value system that the music comes from and incorporating it in an ethical way, because I'm an ethnomusicologist and we get really nervous about this stuff. And so I'm a little bit worried that there's sort of a colonial style process going on, that here is the raw material that we are going to harvest from the colonies, and we're going to then factory it into something that we can sell for more money. That's maybe a bit crude when talking about the Bang on a Can festival, but I'm always worried about who has the power, who is making the decisions, who is shaping the music, and who is contributing material to it. There's a little bit of an uncomfortable disadvantage there, but certainly so there's that. And then certainly in Central Asia itself, there are a lot of different ways that traditional instruments are engaged. Traditional instruments are engaged sometimes in Western symphonic orchestras. There are a lot of interesting collaborations going on around the folk orchestras, which of course were a Soviet phenomenon. I believe they happened in most of the 15 former Soviet countries, that there was a sort of early Soviet period move to reconstruct instruments and turn them into larger concert ensembles. It happened in Kazakhstan, it happened in Ukraine, it happened in Russia, right? Have you seen like the balalaika ensembles? Are we on the same page here? Giant orchestra of balalaikas and maybe an accordionist on the side, and big, huge dance lines of 30 people in Moiseyev, and are we all on the same page with this? Right? Okay. So that process happened throughout the former Soviet Union, and it happened in Uzbekistan. And one of the things that I was curious in my research is like, okay, we're no longer in the Soviet Union. Like, are these things going to survive? And the answer is yes, they are surviving, and they are changing. They are changing their charge to now do more experimental things with these oddly reconstructed pseudo-traditional instruments. And they're doing some of this experimental art music. They're playing newly composed music, and it's kind of neat.
This is very interesting thing in general, and I really much appreciate your presentation, and I wish I could learn more about the instruments. I have a outstanding question, like, what is the best environment to play on this instrument, to your opinion?
On which instruments? The traditional instruments as they were? Sure,
Yeah.
it's a chamber instrument, right?
Chamber. Mhm.
If you think about the dutar, it's a silk stringed instrument. It's not going to sound, actually, it doesn't do that well in a concert hall without amplification.
Mhm.
The sort of social context that it came up in is the music that was used to entertain the nobility in these court cities like Bukhara and Samarkand and Khiva, right? And so this was to entertain the emir. This music came up beginning in the 15th century. And so what happened with the Soviet interventions was they said, oof, these are small, they don't have equal temperament, which is not a bad thing in and of itself, but in a Soviet framework, you wanted equal temperament, meaning that basically that the tones should line up to the 12 notes on a piano, right?
Mhm.
Equal temperament. I could give a whole long lecture on that, and I won't do it. Look at me not doing it. So these instruments are actually suited quite fine to playing individually in your own room.
Mhm.
I play my komus, I practice my komus after the kids go to bed. And in this space, they are right next door to me. And I get out my komus, which also have, I don't believe it's silk, I believe it's cotton, but they have not metal, not big, loud, twangy strings. And I can play my komus tunes and they don't wake up. And so this is why historically the dutar is the only melodic instrument that was sort of the realm of women. Women played the dutar when they didn't play other louder public instruments. They don't play karnai surnai, for instance. Even now today, they really don't. And so its ability to function in the interior is maybe now a bonus. It's sort of, it makes it well suited to playing in a crowded house with lots of caregiving duties and whatnot. And it can be recorded very well there as well.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. We're moving forward to Feruza. Just unmute yourself, please.
Myself, and unfortunately the sound of the lawnmowers is ubiquitous in the United States, so if you give me a moment, I'd like to close the window and to minimize that sound. I did not see that coming. Just a second, please.
Well, it's anyway better than we had before.
Lawnmower bombing better than Zoom bombing. I agree.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you can never know their timing because it's constant. I'd like to thank everyone for their wonderful insight in this vast topic of unpredictable future of post-pandemic art. And first of all, I'd like to especially thank Tanya Merchant for being an ambassador of Central Asian and specifically Uzbek music to the world, because when we discovered her, and Anya was a guest of honor, basically turned into a star of the event that Anna and I had organized 2 years ago. It was dedicated to women in art of Central Asia, and yes, Tanya was our guest performer, and everyone was blown away by the fact that an American woman knows so much about music of Uzbekistan and is able to represent it so magnificently. So thank you so much, Tanya, for your work. And also, I think you touched the subject of your book, but Tanya has an incredible book called Women Musicians of Uzbekistan, which basically gives you an insight of the history of how women of Uzbekistan were able to preserve and the musical tradition, actually, and how they were the keepers of the tradition, and how, right, Tanya?
You got it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so yes, I've read the book. I have it, actually. Thank you so much, Tanya. And yes, so there's this wonderful resource, which was basically a fruit of extensive research. And I definitely appreciate your work, Tanya, because you've done something that we as Central Asians, I don't think we were able to create in such a structural way where, so basically you've created a legacy, and I'm eternally thankful for that. And yes, so these are my comments.
You're too kind. You're making me blush.
No,
there are plenty of resources on all of this in Russian and in Uzbek. There aren't any in English.
But that's the point. That's the point. The language, it only limits the audience to those for whom those languages are available. And having this resource, this current resource, contemporary resource, written in English, I think is already a phenomenon by itself. Because people per se, they don't even, mostly they don't even know about the region, let alone this this particular branch of music of Central Asia. So that's why it makes it so unique. So thank you again, and it's an honor to know you. So you can blush some more, Tanya. It's actually, you deserve it. I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to say that in order to make my presentation structural and to not lose my train of thought, I've made some notes, very old school style, with a pen on actual paper. So I'll be making reference to them throughout this conversation. So I would like to begin. I was thinking about how to begin this discussion because it's so vast. It's so vast, and it's scary, and it's fascinating, and nobody knows for sure. We can only guess the trends, but we can never know what's going to happen next, since the waves are changing so fast, and they all depend on our action, on our general action as humans, as active participants of this experiment of nature. So I decided to start with you can romanticize art as much as you can, but in reality, artists are real people who also need to pay the bills, who need to find a way of expression in this new era of an era where old rules just do not apply. Which is the silver lining of this, is that at the time when old rules do not apply anymore, this is a perfect opportunity to rewrite the rules, and make them applicable to this particular time and space. And so as long as and also no virus, while no virus can defeat this human need to express oneself through art, it's also a time to it will also have to change to meet the challenges of a transformed world. And so especially artists, independent, I was actually very grateful to hear about the aspect of the future of art from the side of the of organizers of art, from the point of view of people who bring the artists together and create platforms to support art and to expose art and to exhibit art. And that actually allows the artists who are being represented to continue to be seen, to continue to actually remain on the scene of arts. And that is wonderful, and I salute you for that. But I guess I'll be speaking on behalf of independent artists, of freelancers who work for themselves, and for some of us, it's the only source of income, and the only source of our human artistic way of expression. So it hit all the independent artists really hard. And Tanya also mentioned that for the representatives of art in music. And basically, I can reciprocate saying that the same challenge are being experienced by visual artists who have now lost so many venues for exposing their art, for sharing their art. And speaking of numbers, I have this data. So there's an ongoing research called COVID-19's impact on the arts, conducted by the Americans for the Art initiative. And according to them, 95% of creative workers have reported income losses. And theoretically, top 4 priorities for survival for these individuals, including myself and including Tanya partially, and the musicians that she mentioned, would be unemployment insurance, forgivable business loans, and food and housing assistance, and affordable health care. And talking about forgivable business loans, not all of us are registered as businesses, because visual arts is such a versatile field, where for some people it's a source of income, for some people it's a way of expressing oneself. And for the longest time, artists were facing this challenge of finding different ways of actually basically support themselves financially through different venues. So some artists have side jobs that actually allow them to basically continue practicing their art, and or actually it's a little bit more stable to be an artist who is a part of an association or a part of a community of artists, where there's a structure and infrastructure available to them, so that there can be a sort of a synergy created, where this community, sometimes a tight-knit community, can apply for grants, and limited grants these days, but still grants which would be able to support them somehow through these times. But also, as everyone else, it's important to remember that we're all in the same boat here, and that as much as some of us may be more or less vulnerable, it's very humbling and very empowering at the same time, to understand that this is maybe the first time in history where we're all in this together. The entire world is all in this together. So I think that helps to not feel a targeted victim of this phenomenon which COVID-19 is. And so there's always a silver lining to everything, if you just let go of this idea of control and expectations. And so in my opinion, the silver lining for artists would be an opportunity to diversify one's professional portfolio. For example, this would be a time to dive into the fields of previously unexplored artistic tools, such as web design, or such as graphic design or art history, where one finally has the time to actually explore those fields which have a direct link basically to what visual artists are doing. It's also a perfect opportunity to get to know the work of other artists, of contemporaries, and to see the trends that are taking place right now, and to actually be inspired by them, and maybe even apply some of the tips that were created by them. And so basically we're in a situation where, although some of us may not have this physical community or a physical union of artists, we can finally take advantage and create this virtual community, where we don't have to necessarily even know each other personally, but where we can just create a virtual community of our own, where we pick our colleagues from all venues and basically stay together, follow their Zooms and follow their lives, and listen to their story of adaptation to this never heard before situation. And so, like I said, there's always a silver lining. No situation is always black or white. There's always something. I don't like the word gray. There's always something golden in between. You know, this space for creation, for liberation from the old, obsolete ideas that were maybe in place, you know, especially in some fields. And so this is an opportunity for liberation and for breathing space, actually, where you're allowed to do that simply because you have the time. And since I'm already touching the subject of women and art in a way, so that changes the order of my presentation, but I think it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I've already mentioned Tanya's work. Tanya being an artist, writing about women artists, basically empowering women artists in her field due to her personal interest in this area. And also, I feel like since Natalya has already mentioned, and actually Olga mentioned that too, they mentioned the role of a woman at these times while as an artist, as a person working in the field of art, but at the same time being a primary caregiver. Now that we all have to work from the comfort of our homes, but also from this restriction of our homes, we are challenged by this new dilemma of how can we remain professionals, but at the same time to provide care for our children, for example, or for the elderly. And in my case, and in the case of many other people in visual arts and arts per se, is basically a balancing act of where to draw a line between, and how to draw a line where, for example, children are not in school and they're home, and where's the space where we can still express ourselves artistically, but at the same time be mothers and be caregivers, and which I find very challenging. And there's an Indian independent film director. She's very well known in alternative Indian cinema. Her name is Nandita Das, who, while under lockdown, which was very strict in India, where you just basically could not leave your house and the groceries would be delivered to you, or you had to report to the police every time you had to go out and get groceries. So there was people, police were everywhere questioning everyone, stopping them. So what Nandita Das did was she actually she created a short film dedicated to the subject of motherhood during the time of lockdown, as well as domestic abuse. So as we all know, the numbers of the cases of domestic abuse during the lockdown have drastically increased. It has little to do with arts, but it has something to do with Nandita Das as director, as an artist in cinematography. So her movie is exactly about that. So she is a busy professional who is Zooming with her colleagues, who is trying to work on a new film, basically. And at the same time, her son comes to her with questions, and her husband wants a chai, or somebody's knocking at the door and can you please get it? But she can't because she's working, or some issues are so pressing that she needs to pause her presentation or pause her communication and actually go get the door or go get milk for her son. And that was fascinating to actually see that this is the reality of not just us mortals, but of also people, of celebrities, of people who are considered the beacons in their areas, and which also the positive side of that is just equalizes everyone, and it allows us to see that even celebrities and people who made it big in their sphere, in their field of art, are also facing the same challenges, which is also empowering in a way. And so half of the movie was dedicated to that, and at the end of it, something very very disturbing happens, is then where she receives a call, and somebody just dialed the wrong number, and there's this woman with a trembling voice telling that her husband is trying to kill her, basically. And so she's asking for help, and this woman doesn't know what to do. And so suddenly you become aware of the situation where women are, just as a gender, are become more fragile in the situation, become more vulnerable, even physically, in the situation of being locked in a very tight space with their spouses, with their sometimes abusive partners. And so that's another aspect of being a woman. And as Natalya has formerly, in the beginning of our discussion, has mentioned, that women appeared on the scene of art pretty late. Again, for the same reason, at the times of Leonardo and Michelangelo, Vermeer, we never heard about women in art, because where were they? Were they not creative and suddenly became creative at a certain point? No, they were not present only because they were the the caregivers, because they were at home birthing children, looking after the family, and they never had this liberty to actually express their creativity. And so it's very important, and we must celebrate the fact that pandemic or not, that this movement of I wouldn't call it feministic, because generally feminism is for some weird reason is perceived as a negative term, whereas in reality feminism is just this revolutionary idea that women are humans too. And so when I talk about feminism, that's exactly what I mean. We don't want to be like men, or we don't want to be strong as men. We just want to have the same opportunities and the same amount of recognition as men. And so I feel like, again, pandemic or not, this trend and this happenstance is actually taking place, for which I am personally very grateful, and I imagine, and I'm sure all women artists are. And what's important in this trend is that we as women, as creative women, that we support each other, that we create this atmosphere of synergy where we are aware that there's this invisible global sisterhood happening, and at any chance we get, we need to be aware, and we need to of this need to create this to involve and support as many creative women as we can, so that the more people are involved in this trend, the more efficient it's going to be. And so I've recently had this honor to work with this renowned, world-renowned, the legend of actually sitar, of Indian sitar performer Anushka Shankar, the daughter of the father of Indian classical sitar music. And so I was part of her latest CD called Love Letters, and it was a wonderful creative project. And but what I wanted to say about this is that she made it a point to only involve women in the making of this body of work, because first of all, because it was a very intimate album for her personally, and a very feminist album as well, where she talks about how men sometimes choose to fix problems by just providing money. They feel like if they can buy out of the problems of different situations. And she was talking about how women are always, how it's condescending to women to be seen like that, to be a weaker sex, you know, still even in our days, where you can be basically silenced by funds which are being provided by men. And so going back to the CD, it involved all women. So basically the cello player was a woman, and all the vocalists were women, and then Anushka Shankar herself, her managers were women, and I, the designer of her covers, single covers, and the album, I'm obviously a woman as well. The poets who wrote the lyrics for the songs were also women. And so it was also a very empowering feeling and a strong feeling of sisterhood, of, if you will, it will sound childish, but again, we can do this by ourselves. You know, we can do this by ourselves, and we can do it well. And with as much as we respect and appreciate the work done by men, sometimes when it's necessary, we simply do not need to rely on them to come up with this finished, polished project, which will be successful. And Saudat Ismailova, by the way, Natalya Andakulova has mentioned her work too. So she has been this beacon of promoting and of exploring the life of women in Central Asia, Uzbekistan in particular. She's a native of Uzbekistan, and she has recently made a film called 40 Days of Silence, which is dedicated to very sensitive subjects in Uzbek culture, basically taboos that nobody speaks about. And it's very important, and even in situations of even in situations where it's basically physically, it can be physically dangerous to voice your opinions as an artist, such as in my native country still, that there are women who are fearless enough and who are fierce enough to allow themselves for their voices to be heard, because it's not only their voices, they're the voices of all the people, of all the women who have been silenced for centuries. Women in the villages, women, artisan women, women who were so obliviated by this, by having been dominated by this patriarchy, that what she does in particular is incredible. Then there's another very famous artist in Uzbekistan. She's a photographer and director, Umida Ahmedova, who, in collaboration with her husband, also tries to work on subjects of, again, the subjects that are not publicly discussed, the taboos. And one of their latest films was actually banned in Uzbekistan. And for many years, she as a photographer has been banned from everything. And so she did not have an opportunity to exhibit her art in Uzbekistan or anywhere else. I don't believe she was able to leave the country even, because this was a sort of a punishment that she's been getting for simply showing the reality, reflecting the reality of the country. It was not made up, it was not exaggerated, it's just the reality. And so it's important that women be fearless under any circumstances, that women be fierce, and women risk their lives in order to be heard. Because as much as we stand on the shoulders of women before us, who did that for us, we have the responsibility to continue this work and to be this platform, to be this raised platform, the next level for women of the future, for artists in the future who can stand on our shoulders and continue building on, and not build from scratch what has been done before them, this incredible work, which would at some point hopefully bring us to the same level, and so that we can get the same exposure and get the same respect as professionals, as artists. Again, like Natalya has mentioned in her presentation, up until very recently, most of the exhibited artists and galleries and gallery owners were men. And which is a pity, because as much as we belong to the same species, it is very well known that we function differently, slightly differently, and beyond stereotypes, of course. Our creativity works differently, our sensitivity and vulnerability works differently, which is undeniable. And so to only see, it is a man's world, but it's shifting. It's shifting, so that I really hope that we see the day where there's balance, where this masculine art is balanced by the feminine art, where we can see the reality in art, where it's not biased, and where it's actually something beautiful and perfect, because perfection only happens where there's balance. Perfection is that golden middle. Well, perfection is a very strong word. There's nothing is perfect, but at least a healthy compromise, a fair compromise, where we meet in this golden space between black and white, between victims and perpetrators, where we can actually meet as humans and be represented equally. So this was, I think, my 2 cents about being a woman and an artist. And what else? So I would like to also
like 5 minutes. Sorry, sorry.
I have 5 minutes left.
5 minutes left. Yeah. So.
No, I pretty much covered everything I feel, but the only thing that I wanted to conclude my presentation with is that how do we rethink the future of art? Since everything is so unexpected and so unpredictable, I guess we just need to let go of this idea of control. It's also it's a moment of, it's a time for memento mori. What does it mean, memento mori, in Latin? It means remember about death, not literally but metaphorically. It means that in order to live, we need to remember about death. And when you think about that, you suddenly appreciate and understand this phenomenon of living in now, living today, and doing the best you can with all the resources available, pandemic or not. So I think this has been a tremendous opportunity for us as humans to reflect on that, act on that, and learn from that. So yeah, I think that's it for today, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Feruza. You did it global. I would like to ask if somebody has a question to Feruza.
Hard to question this quite a statement, which I truly believe in, and that's the time of global shifts. And what we experience with our projects is how we really can find the new connections, a new wave of communication and relationship with different species, not between the gender-wise, but maybe with plants, with animals, with the nature, and how many other environments around and things we can learn from and we can be in contact with and can get something from it. So it's
Absolutely.
very, very interesting time, yeah. And thank you for reminding for memento mori concept, indeed.
I wanted to ask a quick
And
question.
actually what I wanted to say, that's, yeah, support of the artist and considering of artists and especially female artists as an acting body and support is a very sensitive topic. And with our institution, we try to support artists, and maybe one of the biennial who pays the fee extra on top of the production fee to the artist. And that was a key thing. What we left, like as soon as the COVID happened, we remained that we will pay to all the artists what we've promised, as this is the budget. And our curator, she's French, and she's one of the women who prove that women can do many things. She started the biennial, she gave birth to a little girl. So she was in charge of FIAC last year, and she is executive director of Lafayette Anticipations Institutions. So and she got a COVID when the COVID started. So she went through it, and she proved
She had the whole shebang.
Yes,
every Wonder Woman.
And now she's fine, but that was like a very good example of strong women can power the world.
Absolutely.
Tanya?
Let me unmute myself. Good, I think we're okay. Sorry, okay. All the technology. My question is, you mentioned a lot of different people who are women working on Anushka Shankar's album. You didn't mention if the sound guys were guys.
Sound guys. Sound guys.
Meaning people who produce and who set up the microphones, who put all, all the different technological things. We have a phrase for sound guys for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Like cameraman, right?
So sound guys may have been men, but for a simple reason that her show changed venues and countries. So it was a tour which happened, which moved. So hasn't been a permanent venue. I'm sure she would have found a chick sound person, who would be taking care of that. But since for monetary reasons, you cannot take unless you're Michael Jackson, you cannot make your the entire production team with you on tours. And so she toured in throughout the Europe, and then she toured in India, where I had the honor to be invited. And so I cannot speak for all of those venues, but I'm sure that she definitely gave it a try when she could.
Yeah, no, it's worth asking for as a lady sound guy.
Of course.
it's worth trying. And I started specifically because I started doing sound production because I looked around and saw that all the sound guys were sound guys.
Yeah.
So you need to do
And then
it.
there's the stereotype that women are not techie, that we're just not able to do this. So
Like,
it's
I can't
definitely
plug a
worth.
cable in. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
not rocket science. And we could do rocket science too. Rocket science isn't rocket science either.
Absolutely, we can do
But-
anything. We go to space, and so if we do that, then we can definitely deal with the sound problem.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Well, girls, it's 2 hours already that we're speaking, so I believe that we can speak more and more, and we can discuss a lot of spheres that contact with women in art, because we're humans. But as I don't know if you if you heard our previous conference, we talk about women and the future, like what is generally will going on with the future, not in art but like generally. And the point was that it is time for changing, and it's somehow women are now driving the economic, like that's the statistic. It's not the idea, but it's the statistic, because women now are more involved in work than men. So you can hear it on the Facebook. You can just hear the first part of the conference, because it was like 3 hours conference. So the first part was about that, the economic situation, and women are now driving it somehow. So I'd like to thank you for coming. Thank you for support, and thank you for handle all this situation with interrupting. But like, it's happened. It's not anybody's fault. It's just happened somehow. I think that in the end of this COVID situation, we will handle a lot of technical, issues like normally. Thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And so the link for our conference will be on a Facebook page, and you can share it, you can download it, and yeah, thank you again, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful to hear your insight.
Yeah.
And
Thank
an honor
you.
to meet everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Touch. Bye.
Yeah.